Hello, and welcome to the Planet of Horror, where we cover your worst nightmares. I'm your host Kate, and you can find me under the Planet of Horror on all social media platforms. All over America, people are reported missing in national parks every day. In most cases, people have simply got themselves lost and turned around in the wilderness. Some are found after a lot of searching, and then others end up succumbing to the elements. Amongst these missing cases, there are always a few that seem to go missing under very strange circumstances. Today, I will be looking at some cases from a specific region in Vermont and an area that is thought to be a hotbed for strange disappearances. Our story begins in the area of the Glastonbury mountain range in Vermont. The area is part of the Green Mountain National Forest, which has plenty of walking trails, most notably the Long Trail, which is a long hiking trail that spans the length of Vermont and goes over the peak of Glastonbury Mountain, attracting plenty of hikers and keen outdoorsmen. There are a few local towns considered within the hotbed, which are Bennington, Woodford, Glastonbury and Somerset. Though Glastonbury isn't really a town. It was first established in the 1800s and it was made for wood and charcoal production. During the town's peak, the steepest railroad in America was constructed to transport goods in 1872. When this industry started to die and people started to move away, a lot of money was put into refurbishing the town. The railroad being the attraction, buildings were turned into hotels and casinos. It had a successful first season in 1897, but then a flood happened, destroying the railroad, which killed the town's hope for survival. With it being so isolated, no one ever tried to rebuild it, and the wilderness reclaimed back the area. So it's pretty much a ghost town. The Glastonbury mountain range is covered in legend and folklore, with strange reports of unexplained sightings, noises, and people going missing. A local author named Joseph Cinero mapped out where these reports were coming from and found it all seemed to be originating from one area, an area he named the Bennington Triangle in some of his books talking about the disappearances. Like the Bermuda Triangle, the area was thought to be some kind of apex for supernatural or unexplained activity. Though on a wider scale, an author and ex-police detective, David Politis, has been researching missing persons cases from all over different national parks and forests of the United States for years for his books, Missing 411. He leads the reader to believe all these cases are somehow linked, like something is hunting people in national parks. I mention it because some of these cases today, David has linked to a much more countrywide issue. Today, I will be covering 7 cases of people that disappeared without a trace, or if they were found, their deaths were just strange in nature. They were all different ages, different genders, different professions. The only thing they had in common were the area in which they vanished and the mysterious circumstances in which they did. Number 1. The case of John Harbour. In 1897, it was Vermont's first hunting season. John decided to go hunting with his brother and family friend. They were in an isolated area of South Glastonbury when John got separated from the group. Soon after, the brother and friend heard a blast from a rifle and then John shouting for help, saying he had been shot. They immediately started following John shouting, however they couldn't find him. They carried on searching through the night, and at 11 a.m. the next day, John's body was found under a cedar tree, with his rifle nearby, also leaning against a tree. The first issue was that the body was miles away from where the brother and friend had heard the gunshot and John shouting. Someone or something had moved the body. Police or local authorities looked for evidence John had moved himself there, but they didn't find anything. Plus, why would he? If he was in earshot of help, surely he would move towards his brother and friend, not away, if he had the choice. John's case was ruled a murder. However, it's never been solved, and no evidence has ever been found that pointed towards anyone. At first, you might think it is a simple murder, but the mystery is in the timing. If a person shot John, how did they move him so quickly and quietly? John was shot close enough for his brother and friend to both hear the gunshot and John shouting, and yet they didn't see anything. A human body isn't easy to move, and considering there is no mention of John's shouting continuing or moving, we can assume he was dead during the move, which, a dead body is even heavier. I don't think a normal person is strong enough to move a dead body that quickly, and any animal that is, of course, couldn't have shot him. Plus, there was no evidence that an animal had been involved in his death. This case is a mystery, but what is clear is whoever or whatever killed John Harbour left his body under that tree on purpose. They wanted the body to be found for whatever reason. Maybe something didn't like people coming to hunt on the land and was sending a message. Number 2. The case of Carl Herrick. On the 11th of November 1943, 37-year-old Carl went out hunting with his cousin about 10 miles northeast of Glastonbury. Soon into their trip, the boys became separated. After a while, Carl's cousin headed back to camp in the hopes that Carl would do the same and they would meet up. However, Carl never came back to the camp, and as it was getting to dusk with still no sign of him, his cousin called the authorities, who launched a search. The search lasted for 3 days, and at first they couldn't find anything of Carl, but coming up towards the end of the 3rd day, he was found. Carl's body was found in the woodland, with his gun loaded but not fired, nearby, leaning against a tree. Carl's cause of death was ruled to be squeezing. Yes, you heard that right. Something had squeezed Carl to death so tight that his ribs punctured his lungs. What could squeeze a human to death? Well, let me rephrase that, because I'm sure there are many animals that would have the physical strength to. I mean, what would? Think about it. If an animal is going to attack you, its first instinct isn't going to be to squeeze you, bite you, claw you, yeah, but squeeze you? It seems a more thought out death than an animal would do. Plus, his gun, like in our first case, was found nearby, like it was posed there. But with that being said, I also don't think a human would have the physical strength to squeeze someone to death either. And there's also a fair few years between the first case and this case, so it couldn't have been the same person if it was a person. But then, if we go back to the animal theory, wouldn't Carl have shot at it if it had come up on him? And the fact that his rifle was posed, like he was hunting, there wouldn't have really been a point that he would have put it down. So, again, if an animal had attacked him, surely the gun would have just been found, like, on the ground, even if the animal had attacked him so quickly he didn't have time to shoot. This case was ruled to have no foul play involved, and it was closed. It doesn't specifically say, but I'm assuming it was put down to an animal. But like I said, I really don't see why an animal would do that. Number 3, the case of Midi Rivers. 2 years later, on the 2nd of November 1945, a 74-year-old hunting guide named Midi Rivers was out hunting with a group of 4 others in the Glastonbury mountain range. They had all had a good day out and were heading back to camp. Rivers at some point headed off on his own into an area called Hell Hollow Brook, and he just vanished. The group searched all over the area for him and found nothing. They reported him missing, and a massive search lasting a month was launched by local firemen, local volunteers, and even the US Army at one point. But despite the manpower, the only thing found of Midi Rivers was a single rifle cartridge. Midi Rivers was a very experienced local hunting guide, so it's hard to believe he would have just got lost. And even if he did, surely he wouldn't have gone far enough to not be found in a month-long search. The rifle cartridge hints that Rivers shot at something out there, but let's say he shot at an animal that then attacked and killed him. It might have taken his body, but it wouldn't have taken the gun. So surely you'd have found it near the rifle cartridge, and you didn't. There are also theories that Rivers fell down an unmarked mine shaft, and that's the reason they never found him. But that doesn't explain why he would shoot his gun if that was the case. This case still remains unsolved. Number 4, the case of Paula Jean. A year later, on the 1st of December 1946, 18-year-old Paula Jean, a student at Bennington College, tells her roommate she's going on a hike. She plans on taking the long trail up to Glastonbury Mountain. A local man named Lewis Knapp gave Paula a lift to the start of her hike. When she was dropped off, she stopped and spoke to a few other hikers before venturing on. At some point, she went round a corner on her own and just vanished. There were a lot of eyewitness accounts from people that remember seeing Paula on the mountain that day, because she was wearing a bright red coat, which really stood out in the forest landscape. In everything that I've read, you're kind of led to believe that Paula is seen a lot during her hike, and at some point she goes round a corner and does just vanish. No one could explain where she would have gone or how she wouldn't have been spotted. But that being said, she wasn't officially reported missing until she didn't show up for her classes at college. So that's at least 24 hours where she could have got lost. But it was a massive, well-walked trail. She would have had to have left it to get lost. And why would she? Paula's dad headed a month-long search for his daughter, involving as many people and authorities as he could. The search for Paula began one of the largest in Vermont's history. It was the first time authorities had used helicopters to look, so they looked over a large range of area. They also used bloodhounds, and they still found absolutely nothing of Paula. Paula's dad thought maybe she had a secret boyfriend that either ran off with her or killed her, but all leads went nowhere. This case is so odd because you would think that a helicopter would have been able to spot Paula's red coat at the very least, that, they would have found something of her with such a massive search being launched, and they didn't. And if we theorise that maybe she got attacked by an animal, you would think that the bloodhounds would have found something. Animals don't really think about cleaning up a crime scene. And if we go down the route of her having a secret boyfriend she ran off with, why would she be meeting him in the wilderness? Wouldn't you meet at like a car park or a campsite, somewhere you could leave from? And then if we go down the route that he killed her, surely a body or some kind of evidence would have been found. Those kinds of crimes of passion aren't generally massively planned out. No logical reason really fully adds up, and this case still remains unsolved. Number 5. The case of James Tedford. This has to be the strangest case today, and it's a bit of an outlier too, and I'll get into why after. But on the 1st of December 1949, 68-year-old James Tedford, a World War II veteran and local resident in the area, had been out of town visiting family. James had decided to catch the bus home to Bennington. He had done this journey many times before and enjoyed socialising with the locals along the way. The bus was like a long travel bus, so it would stop at certain places for a period of time, allowing people to get on and off it. When the bus arrived in Bennington, James had just gone. There was no sign of where he went or what happened. All of James's belongings were left on the bus where he'd been sat, including his wallet. 14 passengers confirmed they remember seeing James sat on the bus, and none of them saw him get off at any point. Even one of James's friends reported seeing him and speaking to him along the way. There's just no explanation for this one. At first I thought, well, maybe he just got off at a stop to stretch his legs and then missed the bus setting back off again. But then I'm sure police's first thought would have been to check the route of the bus, and they didn't find anything. Plus, none of the passengers reported him getting off at any point. Some theorised that James ran away, but again, no one saw him get off the bus, and he left his wallet. Plus, there was no sign he would do something like that. And even if he was going to, why would he choose, the bus route as he was going home? Why wouldn't he just choose to, leave his home in the middle of the night? It doesn't make sense of why you would do it then. The only way no one saw him exit the bus was if he did it while it was moving, which isn't plausible for even a fit person, never mind someone aged 74. This case is still unsolved, and I genuinely have no idea when it comes to this one. If someone or something had killed him, when? And how did they get rid of the body? I consider this an outlier because although it happened in the area, it wasn't in the wilderness like the others. He really seemed to just vanish into thin air. Number 6. The case of Paul Jepson. On the 12th of October 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepson was being taken around work with his mum. His family owned a farm, and Paul's mum was taking him round with her as she took care of the animals. She had drove them in their family's pickup truck to where they housed some of their animals. Mum instructed Paul to remain in the truck while she went to feed them. When she returned, Paul was gone. In a panic, she immediately started looking around the area, thinking maybe Paul got out and was playing nearby. But she found nothing. A massive search was launched by local police, including the use of bloodhounds, but nothing was ever found. Legend has it the bloodhounds lost Paul's scent at the same location Paula went missing. I've confirmed in my research the bloodhounds did pick up Paul's scent and did lose it at some point, but I couldn't say whether it definitely was where Paula went missing, or whether people just say that because Paul was also wearing a red coat and they wanted to link the disappearances more. The fact the bloodhounds did pick up Paul's scent at all probably hints towards the fact that something bad did happen to him. But in terms of anything else, I don't have anything else when it comes to this case. It does still remain unsolved. Number 7. The case of Frida Langer. Only 2 weeks after Paul's disappearance, 53-year-old Frida, an avid hiker, went out with her cousin in the Glastonbury area near Somerset Reservoir. Frida had fell into a creek, so had decided to quickly head back to the campsite and get changed. Her cousin decided to wait for her on the trail, but Frida never returned. Her cousin reported her missing, and over the next 2 weeks, authorities combed the area and found no trace of her. However, 6 months after Frida's disappearance, her body was found, 5.5 kilometres away from her campsite. A cause of death could not be found because of accelerated decomposition of the body, meaning the body was more decomposed than normal for the time. Something had made the process happen faster. This could be due to natural causes. There are plenty of environmental reasons why that could happen, like weather, and the area is known for rapidly changing weather. The thing that doesn't make sense is that Frida was an avid hiker, and she was confident enough in her ability to navigate back to the campsite that she went on her own, and her cousin was so confident that he let her. So how did she succumb to the elements that close to the campsite? And how did no one find her in the first 2 weeks? Because it is said that they did search the area where her body was found. So, it doesn't make sense. She should have been able to survive long enough to have been found. And if she was attacked by an animal, even if the body was too decomposed to tell, there would have been evidence nearby, like ripped clothing or blood stains. Like I say, animals don't really clean up their crime scenes. When it comes to the location of Frida's body, we're left with 2 options. Either the search party that was out combing the area just, for some reason, missed her body all those weeks they were looking, or something or someone had moved her body there at some point from wherever it was, kind of indicating it was done on purpose, which it's starting to become a theme that in the cases where bodies are found, they're found to be moved or posed, like with the guns. Frida didn't have a posed gun at her crime scene, but she was also just hiking. She likely wouldn't have had one with her. And thinking about it more, the search for Frida lasted 2 weeks, so that was the time that authorities were actively searching for her. But her body wasn't found until 6 months later. So her body was likely come across by just another hiker or just somebody in the area. So if it was that easy to spot that somebody that wasn't even looking noticed it, why wasn't she noticed before? It gives more evidence to the fact that she probably was moved there. This case too remains unsolved. So those are today's missing cases. But let's get into the theories. We'll start with the most logical. Got lost. They simply got lost in the wilderness. Many hikers and hunters have talked about how unforgiving the terrain can be, and the area is known for rapidly changing weather and disorientating winds due to how the valley is laid out. And as I mentioned in one of our previous cases, people have theorised that there are unmarked mine shafts and wells in the area, which does make sense because Glastonbury town was originally built for charcoal and wood production, so I can imagine there would be mines from where they had to dig the charcoal out. But in the cases where bodies were found, they weren't found to be in wells or mine shafts. So, you would think that one of these unmarked places would have been found at some point. A serial killer. Some people think that there is a serial killer hunting people in national parks, which there are some patterns to this cluster of cases. They all happened in the same area, they were all last seen in the afternoon, and they all happened in the last few months of the year. Plus, all the cases where there were bodies found, it was at least suspected that they had been moved or posed in some way, like with the guns. But the first case was in 1897, and the last of today's cases was in 1950, which is longer than the average human's lifespan. So it would have to have been more than just the one person if this theory were to make sense. Many articles I've read say the victims also don't match a serial killer's, that they're all different ages and different sexes, and normally serial killers keep to a theme. They pick victims that are very similar to each other. But you could argue, since this potential serial killer is operating out of the wilderness, they're more picking victims based on opportunity, people that wander off on their own, and that's why they're all different. There are cases of serial killer patterns being more based on how they kill rather than who. You could also see it as the person kind of sending a message, because it's convenient how all of these cases happen towards the last few months of the year during hunting season. Is it someone joining in or someone sending a message to stop? Due to the area's vast scope of isolated wilderness and inaccessibility, finding a body isn't an easy task. The conditions could easily ensure that someone's remains would never be found again, which you might be thinking, well, that could apply the same to if they got lost or attacked by an animal. And yes, but everyone that went missing was with someone. And my first thought, if I got separated, would be to find my way back to them, not venture further into the wilderness or be trying to find my way all the way back home. If an animal had attacked them, they might have taken or eaten the body, but normally there's found evidence like belongings or blood, and there was none of that, almost like it was cleaned up. The last issue is that they seem to just stop. But maybe this serial killer moved to another national park, like the cases of missing 411 suggest that this is a countrywide issue. So maybe he never stopped, maybe he just moved. There is also the fact that all these cases happened during Glastonbury's decline, as it was becoming this ghost town. Because currently today I think there's 8 people living there from my research. So maybe the person or thing got what it wanted. It got everyone to move out of the area, and that's why they stopped. UFOs. There have been many sightings of strange lights and sounds in the area. There is even an official report from 1984 where a local man named Dan Pratt saw what he described as a flying silo-shaped object in the sky. John Keel, an American journalist and influential ufologist, theorizes the Bennington Triangle is one of many areas he calls widows' areas. John believes in these areas there is some kind of interdimensional doorway or vortex into another world where monsters can come through and people can fall into. Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts is another example of one of these widow areas that he gives. Out of all the theories, this is kind of the only one that explains what happened to James Tedford. Like maybe he fell through a vortex and that's why he just disappeared into thin air. The reports of strange sounds and objects in the forest, some people put down to a Bigfoot creature hunting people on the slopes. Most of these sightings were passed down through word of mouth, and there are no official accounts. The only one I could find was from 2003, where a local resident named Ray claims to have seen a gorilla-sized creature stumbling nearby his home through the snow. This sighting was even picked up by local news stations. In all the cases, all the people were local people and not tourists, even though there were plenty. And they were all in the last few months of the year during hunting season. Maybe this creature doesn't like people hunting in the area, or maybe it wanted to join in. But it kind of indicates that something was targeting specifically like the local people, not out-of-towners, which is an odd one because it makes it even less likely that they just got lost because they would know the area better than like a tourist would. A creature like this might explain how John's body got moved so quickly, because I can imagine it would have the strength to lift a dead body that far. And also, it might explain how Carl got squeezed to death, because I can imagine it'd have the strength to do that too. And the fact that if it does exist, it's managed to go this long without being caught or officially cited through like a video, that it's got some kind of intelligence. The final theory is the curse of Glastonbury Mountain. Folklore from the area say the native tribe that used to inhabit the land believed Glastonbury Mountain was cursed, as it housed their dead at its base. They also talk about an enchanted stone that's located somewhere in the area, and that if a person accidentally steps on it, it would swallow them whole. Legend has it that they would actually refuse to go onto the mountain because of how cursed they thought it was. I feel like there is something to this theory, that if you look at the timeline of these cluster of cases, that something is wanting to keep people like out of the mountains. Like the first case happened on the very first opening season of Glastonbury, where they were trying to remodel it into this tourist destination. So maybe the spirits of the land didn't want that, and that's why the flood happened. And then as Glastonbury declines, more and more people are going missing, like whatever is in the land is trying to drive the people out. And then there's the fact that it was just local people. No tourists went missing. Like the spirits of the land were angry at the specific people that are settled there. So that's it for today's episode, guys. Those were all the cases and the theories. So please let me know in the comments what you think. Which theory do you believe the most? And do you have any others that I didn't cover today that you might want to share? And make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you know the next time I upload. And with that being said, I'll be with you in the future for more of these missing person cases. Over and out.